career-killing campaigns and why B2B is never just business. I think there's some points to be made that B2B can be boring at times, but I think as somebody who works in the B2B space myself, I think it's a great challenge for us to have is to create amazing campaigns within a B2B component. And to talk about that is, well, I'm going to throw it over to Alex first, who is the Senior Marketing and Communications Manager over at Precision Drilling. And she's going to be moderating this conversation with this powerhouse of panelists. Yeah, Alex, take it away.
Thank you, Derek. Welcome to Creativity Week, everyone. As Derek mentioned, I'm Alex. I'll be your moderator today. And without further ado, let's dive into it. So in B2B, we are conditioned to speak to the spreadsheet, features, specs, and rational proof. But market data tells us that buying decisions are deeply personal. If a buyer makes the wrong call in high stakes industries, they don't just lose budget, they risk losing their job or credibility. Today, we look at why safe creative is actually a massive commercial risk. Let's do a quick round of introductions. Panelists, please share your name, company, and the industry you serve. Jody, can you kick us off, please?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Jody Stapley, and I am the brand director at Blackline Safety here in Calgary. And we work in industrial B2B SaaS tech. So we service any organization that has a high hazard work environment, keeping their workers safe.
Perfect. Suzanne?
Hi, I'm Suzanne Brown. I'm the principal and managing director of Relish Ideas. We have been around for 27 years serving B2B organizations, largely in tech, through software AI into construction.
Thank you. Christina?
Hi there, I'm Christina Fauser. I'm the Director of Design and Brand Strategy at WCD, where I support both our brand and a wide range of B2B customers across operational and corporate services industries. B2B, we help organizations streamline their back office with solutions that optimize how work gets done. So think HR, administration, mailrooms, records management, and in my case, marketing.
Perfect. And Rhonda?
Hello, everyone. My name is Rhonda Gwynn, and I'm the head of marketing for North America at Rosen. And we serve the oil and gas industry in the public safety space. So we inspect pipelines and assets and let the companies who operate them, let them know how they're doing, if they're healthy, and if they're not, what to do about it.
Thank you all. So let's start off with myth number one, the myth of the rational buyer. Market data consistently shows that emotional consideration and trust drive long-term business growth far more than short-term rational pitches. Yet, corporate environments default to fear of sticking your neck out internally and fear of standing out externally. Rhonda, do you mind kicking us off here? At Rosen, you handle inline pipeline inspections where bad decisions can lead to environmental disaster. When the stakes are high, how do you use creative execution to build boardroom confidence when all competitors look identical on paper?
Thanks, Alex. That tension that you're describing, that's the real deal. In high stakes industries like pipeline integrity, it's amplified. When the downside risk is environmental damage or regulatory exposure, risk to public safety, and personal accountability, safe doesn't feel like a marketing choice. It feels more like an episode of Survivor. But there's a paradox. So when everything looks safe and identical, nothing inspires confidence. So the role of creative in this context isn't to be provocative for its own sake. It's also to reduce that perceived risk, to take that down, making trust tangible and human and memorable at whatever decision level the decision needs to be made at, whether it's boardroom or operational or in the field. Wherever that decision is made, you need to try and build that trust. So you can approach that in a couple of different ways, but one that I like to use is to reframe that creative risk as it's not an expression of your brand. It's more of a risk mitigation. So we don't sell pipeline inspections, for example. We sell data and consultancy, and then we give confidence under pressure. So creative execution needs to answer questions from that executive's point of view in terms of, can I defend this decision? Can I sleep at night? Does it hold up against, regulatory, legal, public scrutiny? So it means you have to shift your message from things like features and benefits to consequences and specifications to like real world scenarios or case studies where we've had success. Do some storytelling, right? So, for example, instead of leading with tool accuracy percentages, we bring to life what happens if a defect is missed, or how early detection can not only protect your reputation, but also your pipeline. And if you use an engineering critical assessment, you can have a view on what your pipeline looks like in the future. So you can make decisions now and in the future, which makes the decision maker look like a rock star. So we, as marketers, need to provide a clear and defensible decision path that they can take to their boss, and then they can win, because ultimately they're being judged not on our specification, but on their decision-making capability.
So you're giving them all the data they need to help their leadership make the right decisions, inspiring confidence.
Absolutely.
Jody, you deal with some similar things at Blackline Safety, but you're dealing more with life and death technology. You noted earlier that it often gets trapped in a features war. Can you share how a single client quote about being the steward of my people's money bypassed the technical features list entirely, or if you have anything to add on to what Rhonda said?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we are in a very, I think, tend to think that we're in a very rational buyer's market. These are organizations that need safety devices to detect gas or detect if someone working alone falls or gets injured or has a medical event. And so you think this is a very rational buyer. But everyone that we're talking to, and I think this is true of any industry, has a lot of emotion behind some of that. There are emotions they feel around, I want to make the right decision. I don't want to look bad for choosing the wrong solution. And in our case, in a life and death kind of situation, I need this thing to keep people alive. And so we find that a lot of us, and we've done it too, is we all start to use the same jargon and the same language and the same technical specs and features. And when it comes down to it, like truly what makes Blackline better than our competitors is that if something happens to a worker, someone else knows about it. So in the case of our competitors, the thing will beep and flash, sort of like the smoke detector in your house, which expects you to then take the action to get yourself out and protect yourself. Ours will actually send the alert to software, and the right people get alerted, and there's 24/7 monitoring so that even if the person who's on your protocol doesn't get the notification, someone else does, and it immediately EMS or in whatever the situation requires happens. The story quickly, Alex, about the steward of someone's money was actually when I was at Benevity, and this was software that facilitated workplace giving and grant making. And we had a client who came to us who said, I was with a competitor and I found out 2 years after the fact that we had millions of dollars just sitting in the ether. This was my company's money that was supposed to go to charity that never did. And we never knew about it until far too late. And so she was very risk averse. She wanted to switch, but she was like, I need to know, I am a steward of my people's money, and I need to know that the money is going to get to where it's intended to go, especially with something as emotional as charity. And so that became a story that we told in every sales process. It was how we talked about how money transferred, because otherwise you're just saying like, our money transfers this way. It's very technical. Everyone's saying the same thing. We told them, this is the percentage of the time the money gets to the charity, and this is how it happens.
That's great. Suzanne, you deal with a lot of highly analytical, data-driven buyers, such as engineers. How are you bridging that gap between data and human emotion, as Jody mentioned?
Yeah, this is actually like one of my favorite things. I'm like a real fan of data and geeking out with it. So, and we work with a lot of organizations that have like mountains of it, like they have spreadsheets, reports, research, like very, very much data everywhere. So I find the challenge really isn't getting like more information, it's helping people understand information. And we know like when we work with people that are highly technical, they like to like over communicate to the point of overwhelming people. So sometimes we'll look at what we have and we can build things like calculators, like an assessment or like a visualization tool that helps people explore the data themselves. Like even if the data sets can help them input some of their challenges in so they can see what the outputs might be. once I find that once people can see themselves in that information, they start arguing with it and they start using it. So for me, data and emotion like aren't really opposites. Data helps people understand facts. The value proposition gets understood more clearly, and helps them feel more confidently to act on them. So I think, yeah, just using what you have to articulate the value proposition is a really, really strong way to
Yeah.
go. Mhm.
Data helps people process their emotion, especially when they're highly analytical. That's a great comment. Christina, do you have anything to add in here about the fear of sticking your neck out internally, fear of standing out externally?
Yeah, I would say, you know, it's more risky to play it safe internally, if you're going to be forgettable externally, I'd say. Where a lot of my customers, I find they want to add more context, more features, more explanation, where really at the end of the day, simplicity and memorable creative is really going to get you where you need to go externally in front of your customers.
Does anybody else have anything to add in or build on that before we move on to myth number 2? All right, let's talk about bypassing the features war. So research indicates that the vast majority of buying groups choose a brand they were already highly familiar with on day one of their search. If you are only pitching features when a buyer is actively looking to buy, you've already lost. You need a clear customer promise, yet most B2B marketing avoids making direct commitments entirely. Jody, you have lived this. The moment you market a new category, competitors copy your words. How are you evolving your messaging to avoid the sea of sameness?
Yeah, this is funny because this training that I'm in actually right now, I'm with someone that's in my training with me as a salesperson who used to be at a competitor. And this came up yesterday, how when we created, we sort of were category creators for, we could have just been gas detection. We weren't just joining gas detection, but we were the first to cloud connect to software that will give you the data that you need to actually understand what's happening on your work sites and then use that data to make decisions really quickly. And then also to see some trends that are happening on your work site so you can prevent accidents and incidents from happening in the future. So we called it connected safety, right? And then we spent all this time trying to describe what connected safety is to people, and it became very jargony. And we were doing like it's real-time information and it's cloud connected. And then our competitors were coming in and they're like it's real-time information, and saying the exact same and calling it connected safety, what they do. And so we realized very quickly that we needed to actually start talking in human terms about what that means and what it actually allows you to feel, be, or do. I'm stealing words from Emma Stratton. If anyone's read her book, Punchy, I recommend that you do if you haven't already. She talks about presenting things more as superpowers or like magic gifts to people that help them do, feel, or be something, as opposed to just being like, here are the features and here's the jargon and the technical specs. And so anyway, this guy in my training yesterday said, oh yeah, when I was at this competitor, we used to try to avoid the conversation at all costs of what real-time alerts meant, because we knew that it would all fall apart as soon as we started talking about that. So it was a bullet point. Sometimes it was a lead thing on the website, but we would start just talking about the gas detection and the sensors and the things like that, because the second I started talking about that, I couldn't defend it. And so I'm like, okay, then we're doing the right thing. We can now describe it in more human terms. And then if our competitor gets asked, if something happens to a person, will someone else know about it? They can't defend it as strongly as we can.
I really like that quote. We can't defend it, or they can't defend it as strongly as we can. That really is what it comes down to when separating you from your competitors. Rhonda, I saw you nodding along and laughing. Do you have something to add?
It just speaks to me. I've had the same situation. I mean, when I started with Rosen, we were very small. We were a very small operation, and we were the last call. And now we are one of the first calls. We're one of the technology leaders in most of the technologies that are used to inspect pipelines. But it's so funny how you do something and then someone else is doing something and they're saying the exact same thing. But if you look at the specifications, you actually see that apples are not apples necessarily. So it's just interesting to hear that experience is happening elsewhere as well. So it gives me, it makes me feel good to know that others are struggling with the same things that I am. So.
Suzanne, you guys deal with a lot of data over there, as you've mentioned. Can you comment on providing a clear customer promise that most B2B avoids and why that is so important with emotional buyers?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Basically, it has to kind of happen like before the spreadsheet. Like they'll have to like, you have to kind of like build up that trust. So finding assets that are convincing, like case studies and like pulling the problem first before providing like the solution is usually the way we head. So having them kind of connect with the larger story that you kind of understand the nuances of their issue.
How do you, to add to that, Suzanne, how do you guys design your creative assets that help your buyers sell value to those hidden gatekeepers that you mentioned?
Okay. That's a good question. Like you really have to think about that procurement cycle. So, you have to sort of understand the pathway, like are they going to finance or then they going to their boss, because the value proposition will change depending on who they're speaking to. Like finance is worried about one thing, engineers are always worried about risk, boss is worried about reputation, those type of things. So you have to provide marketing materials to that internal person who's essentially selling your product internally with what they might need. So we look at things like what information they would need to defend your product in a boardroom. What could they forward by email to their boss that would be convincing, that's like scannable and easy to ingest and understand? What would help them explain why you're worth more than the cheaper option? I think that's a big one. Because essentially you're building a champion internally to fight for you. You have to provide them what will make their job easier. But again, you're speaking to a number of different stakeholders that have a number of different pain points. So you have to consider that in all the materials that.
That's great. Yes, that's a really good point. Trying to find the right person that can sell your product for you and giving them the confidence to do so internally by making a clear customer promise that you're not afraid to make because you stand behind your product. Christina, do you have anything to add on there from your experience with your guys's? You recently did a brand refresh.
Yeah, I'd say a couple things. Even with WCD, a lot of our services very similar to other competitors in the Calgary market. But I think what differentiates us is we do go with that emotional approach, with really speaking to the problem we're trying to solve with these features that are similar across the board. But I mean, what sets us apart is, the partnership that we provide and that emotional connection to teams. I think that's important to say. I think also in terms of getting past the gatekeepers too, when we're selling our products to B2B organizations, is people share clarity. So if the marketing is clear, concise, it's easy to defend with content, and it's unique, even in terms of format or creative, I think buyers are more willing to pass it down the chain to make a decision confidently than if they were overwhelmed with content and features and what have you.
I like how you finished that off there, and I'd actually like to bring this back to Rhonda. When you're talking about being overwhelmed with features, Rhonda, how do you guys dial that in when you're selling?
So for us, we have a lot of different technologies to find a lot of different things. And you can use them in a million different ways, depending on what your pipeline situation, your parameters are, your what the depth of cover is. Is there a railroad crossing? Is there roads, or are you going into a river or under a riverbed? There's all these different permutations for all the potential features and benefits. So what's important for us is to really hone in, and we work closely with sales on this, but to really hone in on what is it that the customer actually needs? Because sometimes the customer may be new to the job, might be new engineering and training. They may not understand what that particular type of pipe will do, because different types of pipe also have different problems with them, right? So what we can do is we can set it up for them to understand, yeah, okay, these are the things that you likely have. I know you've been asked to look for, let's say, corrosion and geohazards. Okay, well, you might also have some interacting threats because of the pipeline you have. So we try to really consult and work with the customer, so they're not looking at the whole pantheon of what's possible, but of what really is going to help them solve the problem that they have. And if I may, just two other things that we do in terms of creative to try and get into that gatekeeper piece is we were really struggling because as companies grew, we weren't just talking to the integrity engineers or the VP of integrity. We're not even getting a chance to talk to procurement because they're behind those closed doors and we could never meet them. So they didn't get to know who we were as a company, and we worked really hard to make that relationship. So we actually built a capabilities guide, which is something you can print as a glossy magazine, or you can have it as a PDF, and you can plug and play, rip it apart, put it together however you see fit. But it allowed people who never met us to understand who we are as a company, what our history is, what our R&D commitment is every year, how we're driving technology, what our safety records are, and all the things that give them a clear picture that when they put us up against our competitors, like, oh yeah, there's a differentiator there. And then second of all, we get in front of our customers face to face. So we do this thing called integrity on tap. So you can imagine we have a situation where you've got sliders and beer, at the end of the day, and we'll put a few slides up on a screen, but it's very informal, it's very close, and we talk one-on-one with the customers. We go, what challenges are you facing? Is it a geohazard because you're dealing with landslides where your pipeline is? Okay, this is how we can help you. And they get in a very closed and I'll say intimate but friendly atmosphere to ask those questions and get those answers. Then they can go back to their employer and say, yeah, this is the way to go because I now understand how this works. So, yeah.
That's great direction. And actually, on that point, Jody, I'm very interested to hear what you guys do there that gets you behind or to those gatekeepers as well, behind them, to the people, to procurement.
Well, I'm considering integrity on tap now because I like sliders. To get to procurement. Well, I think I wish I could have some from our sales team answer that because I'm providing with lots of stuff and hoping that it's happening. But I
Well,
think,
what are you providing them with?
yeah, I mean, okay, so something that we had never really done much of before, but that has really been resonating lately that I'm getting good feedback on is we did a brand video that showed the value of what people are going home to. And so it's like these are people who we had 3 scenarios where we showed people, normal day at work and something goes wrong and there's someone waiting for them. And spoiler alert, at the end, they all get home to what matters. And that's something that, we wanted to create some top of funnel, more brand awareness, but it was also an opportunity in these conversations to be sending something like that through alongside some of the other things. And so the sort of the more technical spec feature-based things. And people love it. Like it's something we get a lot of comments about. It's something that they're passing on in their organizations. Like when we're talking to potential customers, they're passing it on in other organizations. Be like, hey, just so you understand what we're trying to achieve here. Here's what and like asking our distributors that we work with are asking if they can co-brand it and things like that. So that's
So you're tying into the emotional aspect for companies that they're not just employees, they are fathers, they are mothers, they're brothers, sisters.
Yeah.
They are more than just, a number and a paycheck.
Yeah, and of course you have to land it with the how, right? Like that's the important why, but you have to land it with the how, and we have all of that to go along with it, with the features and specs and lots of good details on that and how-to videos. And but I think telling that whole story is really important.
Perfect. Okay, if we don't have any other comments on myth number 2, we can hop into number 3. So pushing beyond safe without getting fired. There's a classic corporate defense mechanism. Nobody gets fired for buying IBM, and nobody gets fired for making an invisible, forgettable ad. There is often an immediate panic if a campaign does not feature a literal clipboard, hard hat, or warehouse. Christina, you've recently guided a brand refresh at WCD, which you mentioned. You pushed for humorous, provocative headlines, but the internal instinct was to default to safe, literal tech illusions, AI robots. How do you protect a distinct idea from being watered down by an approval committee?
Yeah, great question, Alex. It's always a challenge, which I love. I think, a lot of ideas don't get watered down because they're necessarily bad. I think they get watered down because multiple stakeholders are really just trying to reduce risk from different angles. So I would say, in my experience, there's a few things. So bring stakeholders in early. I think is important. So people will defend what they help shape, essentially. Selling strategy before creative is huge. So getting alignment on the strategic problem first. If stakeholders agree on what the audience needs to feel, not just what they need to know, I think the creative conversation becomes much more productive. And I think, using emotion strategically. So it doesn't always have to be a humorous approach or a flashy headline. I think as long as you're emoting confidence in your creative, it's going to go a longer way. In the case of the brand refresh for WCD, the goal was really to use more of an emotional, memorable approach in order to differentiate from our competitors, who are also using tech heavy visuals, robots in their marketing, especially with AI coming along. Everyone's trying to say that, hey, we do AI too, which is important in what WCD does for their customers, but it shouldn't lead the conversation. I think that story and that emotion behind what we're trying to help and solve for our customers should be in the forefront versus the features. I think, the irony that the safe idea or the safe creative internally often becomes that riskiest externally because nobody remembers it. So pushing that more emotive storytelling aspect, I think, is memorable in the long run and is what convinces a lot of my customers to go with that riskier idea.
That really ties into what Jody just said about our last myth and how she created the video campaign that really tied in that emotional aspect to their product. So, Jody, this must have not been an easy idea to pitch creating a video about people being unsafe and this really, high risk operations happening that require your product. How did you get that pushed through?
Yeah, that's a good question, especially for something like that because it costs a lot of money. And because I wanted high value, like high production value. And I did have to get very creative about how I spent my money. But yeah, I mean, there's always some fear and like, where's the product? Where does the product show up? But I think the biggest thing is I created I created a mood board. I created a whole short narrative around it, which like not just a written narrative, but I presented it and I did it verbally. That sounds obvious, and a lot of people already do that, but like I think depending on how your organization works, especially in B2B when things are moving really fast, sometimes it's like sending it off and hoping for the best. But I get people in a room, I read it out, I show the emotion in my voice and my enthusiasm for it, and include examples of the vibe we're going for. So like I said, a mood board, but I also showed some commercials and ads that I liked from other brands that took a similar approach. So not the same style even necessarily, but like how they went for an emotive approach instead of. So one example I really liked was an old Volvo ad where they didn't talk at all about the braking, like they wanted to be the safest car ever made. And so it was like a woman who was going to have a baby and all the moments that they were looking forward to, and she almost gets hit in a crosswalk by a Volvo, but the brake system worked. So it's not about the brake system. They never mentioned the brake system, but it's about how it's the safest car for you and for others. And so that was one example of something I shared just to show, hey, look, you can take a leap and do something highly emotive and not mention every feature or any feature at all, but people will get it.
Yeah, that is a great ad. I know exactly which one you were talking about when you said that. Rhonda, I guess I'll call on you. You famously fought corporate headquarters for 2 full years to get an adventurous, localized campaign approved. What is your playbook for a marketer facing outside institutional resistance?
Well, I'll be honest, like there's when you're facing this kind of resistance, there's no silver bullet, there's no magic wand. What worked for me wasn't one bold move. Once my first pitch failed, it became a very structured and strategic internal campaign. So at the heart of the campaign, that's you, that's the marketer, that's your perseverance, it's your belief in the direction you want to take it. You know it's correct, and you know that you're going to attain your objectives. You know your products and services, you know your customer base. And for me, this campaign was something that I knew to my core was going to be successful. So I just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. Maybe some people thought that was irritating, but regardless, we got to the point where we were looking at creative, and we all know that everybody has opinions on what good creative is. Even people who are outside of marketing, they have the strongest opinions, I think. But when you're attempting creative that pushes the company's boundaries or where they feel comfortable, you need to separate taste from business. So most resistance isn't actually about commercial danger. It's about discomfort and someone's personal opinion. So if you can move from the conversation and reframe it to like, this feels different, is not the same as this is risky to the business. It's more like the real risk is being stagnant, being commodity, and having an invisible brand. So when you shift the debate from the creative preferences and more of a market consequence, then you can change who can win the argument, and that can be you. So then next I built a squad. So from the first time I pitched the campaign, the room was dead quiet, and it became very clear that I was not going to win in a single meeting or head on, and more's the pity, but I had to reframe my attack. So take it from a different angle. So I built my squad. I brought in influential stakeholders across all sorts of functions who could help me out. So, the ops team, regional leadership, sales, and even some engineers. Brought them in early, and I let them help provide the content and kind of develop the idea a little bit. And then the next time I brought out my slide deck, it was obvious that like the water cooler chatter had been doing some work for me. So it was no longer a foreign concept. It was this cool idea that might be happening. And regardless, though, I still had detractors. I had people saying things like, that's not the way we do it, and none of our competitors do that, or that's not our tone of voice, that's not the way we do things. So I began asking why a lot, and then I started asking why not. So it took a lot of conversations, but we went from my crazy idea to a campaign that sales, business development, and our engineering team were really behind and really gave it momentum. So another thing was, making a point of addressing, okay, worst case scenario, what happens if the campaign fails? What's the potential followed? Is there brand damage? Is there risk to our customer base? And in doing that, I was able to kind of flip the script on how much we could actually learn regardless of how successful it was. But also we developed some clear guardrails, we refined the scope of work, and then we made a phased approach. So if phase one succeeded, then you could move into phase two, phase three, and there was always success measures in place. So in providing an exit strategy and all the other actions, we've really lowered the risk or the perceived risk. So my learning there was that, bold ideas feel safer when they have constraints and, consequences tied in. But I would say above all, don't give up. I mean, I didn't pitch every day for 2 years. That would be the definition of crazy. I bided my time, I evolved my argument, and I let everybody marinate for a little while. So once you get the green light, though, deliver, over deliver, show what you've learned, communicate your successes early, often, always, and in every single way you can. Because this way, you can use that work to then reset your company's internal risk tolerance. And then going forward, it's not going to be such a slog.
That was great advice, especially the resetting the internal risk tolerance. I love that line. Suzanne, I'll call on you here. You mentioned you often use data to sell your ideas while maintaining that emotional connection. Do you have an example of how you successfully use data to push forward a risky campaign or marketing idea?
Um, yeah, like we work with a company in the US that does that helps with road crossings and emergency crossings, and also builds case uses for new infrastructure. So with them, we actually created a data visualization tool that pulled railroad traffic and accident reports through all of the states and road crossings, so that anyone that was a municipal decision maker could go on and use the data for the specific data points to be able to draw a report to rationalize a purchase through a long procurement cycle.
I love the visual data marketing. That's a great play. Okay, I will start to open it up for questions. Everybody, please leave your questions in the chat box and I will try and read them all out. But for now, we can move on to some easier, quicker questions for you ladies. So, what is one piece of safe B2B creative you see all the time that drives you crazy?
I'll go. In my career, I've used many, engineer with a hard hat in a field with a pump jack in behind them. See that a lot, and it drives me crazy. It's so literal.
Jody, do you have anything that drives you nuts?
Yeah, I think, and I've been guilty of this, so I will admit that. Just things that it doesn't make it clear what you do. And that can also be tricky when you're trying to be emotive and things like that, but somewhere people should be able to easily find out what you do. If it takes 3 pages on a website or having to click through multiple things to find out what a B2B business does, that's real hard. And then the other thing is, I think we've talked a lot about it today, is just a feature dump, just like dumping features on folks, along with that cliche image. And we've done it years ago. We did it in ads. Like you look at any old Blackline ad, and it's like a bullet point feature dump with a pretty cliche image. And so we're doing our own photography and trying to do much more authentic in situation kind of things, and not doing the feature dump, but actually presenting the value. So yeah.
Rhonda, I saw you laughing.
All of that for sure. But I think another thing that drives me a little crazy is having too much text. We see it in slides all the time. You'll have a CEO or VP or someone in sales. They just want to pack everything on the slide. It's not what the slide is meant for. It's the same with the creative. The creative is not meant to tell you everything. So it's that text heaviness, but it's also what kind of words you're using. Like, are you using nomenclature? Are you using vernacular that people understand? Are you using a lot of speak that you only really use in your company? Like my company is founded in Germany and we have so many acronyms. We actually have a search engine so you can figure out what acronym and what it is defined by. So, and we don't want our customers to have to deal with that. So it's always having to, put that external filter on any creative that we build to say, okay, are we making sure that it's clear and concise and it's not going to be something that their brain is going to overheat trying to comprehend, and I'm not trying to make the customer sound like a stupid person here. It's just a matter of how easy is that content to absorb.
If the customer has to think about it, you've already lost them. Suzanne, I feel like I keep giving you the engineer and data questions, but is there a difference in your experience in how engineers versus executives justify their decisions emotionally?
I honestly think like we always kind of think of them as a little different, but I think they have more in common than we would think. Like neither one of them wants to make a bad call. Like engineers tend to worry about whether something will work. Like they get down into like minutia details. And executive worry about what happens if it doesn't work. But so they have different concerns, but basically I think the underpinnings of it is the same basic like human psychology.
All right. Looks like we have a question here in the chat. So Ali asks, how do you pressure test if copy is going to land with your audiences and if you are actually addressing their pain points? Christina, I see you nodding here.
Yes, yes. We do a lot of A and B testing in our marketing as well. So whether it's, same ad but different headline or, different image even, to see which creative seems to outperform others. I find that's kind of a successful approach that we've used before. But yeah, good question.
I like that. Does anybody else use the A and B testing internally?
Yeah, we use A/B testing on like display ads and things like that for sure. I think another big thing is to be where people are and like actually meet with your customers if you can at all. And so like I've gone to conferences that they attend or places that they are or online spaces where they are to see how they're talking about things and see what questions they're asking and just get kind of trying to get into their heads a little bit is a big one.
Mm. Because I'm an external agency working with internal marketing and sales teams, often I feel like one of the things that we kind of have to go in with is that mindset that sales and marketing need to work together. They're not two separate entities. So we rely on that sales team as a feeder back and being able to build out really good buyer personas as well. So we can make sure everything's on point. If you run in silos, nothing is going to be successful.
Right. Rhonda, you were gonna, oh, sorry, Christina, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to add to customer surveys. We do that quite a bit in our emails and what have you, just to make sure that customers are happy and we're delivering and addressing their pain points for sure. That's another effective mode.
That's a great question.
In terms of the A and B testing, we do some of that, but one of the things that I really like to do is to show a new piece of creative to our engineering team, like use our sources inside. We've got a lot of very intelligent people who sit over in our research development center who are, they've got PhDs in physics and whatnot. And then we've got our engineering team in Calgary here locally. And we also have C-suite individuals. So I like to put a creative in front of them and say, okay, put yourself in the customer's shoes. Tell me what you think. And not only does two things. First of all, it gives me some feedback, but then it also keeps that sort of customer viewpoint at the top of their mind and might hit home more often. So the more I do that, the more they're thinking about how the customer is interacting with us as opposed to us communicating at the customer. So.
Yes, yes, definitely. So what is the real reason, in your guys' opinion, ideas get watered down? Is it risk? Is it ego? Or is it just misalignment?
Fear, I think, and everyone's fear is maybe a little bit different, but I think it's all coming from a similar place. Like we've talked about people, like there's a reason people want to be safe because safe keeps their job. But ultimately, I mean, I hope that organizations are wanting to push a little bit more and looking for the right thing, not just the easy thing. But that doesn't always happen. So, but I think it is fear. And I loved what Rhonda said about flipping the why to a why not. And I would love to see that happening on both sides. That's the ideal scenario where when we're creating things that we're thinking about why not, and that on the receiving end, it's like, yeah, you know what, this feels right. Why not? As long as there's not too big a risk to it. It's maybe not the safest or easiest IBM choice, but they've made me feel like I'm going to be safe here, and so why not try something different or new?
Absolutely. Yes. Does anybody else have anything to add on to that question?
Sure, I'll add something quick. I'd say, when you have way too many perspectives it tends to dilute that core idea. And I find that's where a lot of the creative, in my experience, gets watered down. Everyone wants to put their mark on it. Everyone has something to say. And in the end, the work just loses its distinctiveness, really.
In your guys' opinion, where do you draw the line between a customer promise and overpromising? That's a tough question, but Jody, you kind of touched on it earlier.
Trying to come off mute. Yeah, that's always a tough one. And I think this is a common thing that happens where like marketing says something that then the person goes to sales and sales like, what were you thinking saying that? And then it goes into, they buy the thing and it goes into implementation. And then the poor implementation people are like, why would the salesperson tell you that? That's sort of the trope, right? But I think the biggest thing is just leaning into the thing that you can own. And that's always going to be true to you. It's going to be the most authentic. It's going to be the reason that people truly want to buy from you and why you are the right choice for them. And then be truthful about the other things. But obviously leaning into the things that you can be absolutely truthful about and make that promise something that you can own is, I think you're pretty safe there.
Rhonda, in your guys' company, you handle a lot of similar things where you do have to make that promise that your product is going to work. It has to work. Do you have any experience in this?
So customer promise is a hard thing. And I'm a bit of maybe a Puritan where that's concerned. I can be quite frank that I think a lot of people who have a lot of companies who have a customer promise, they can't get it behind it 100%. Like, for example, if I wanted to say that I'm going to give our clients 100% on-time reports and I'm going to have 100% perfect success in a run, so an inspection, I can't do that. I would love to be able to say that, but it is not actually possible because you're dealing with so many different parameters. Like, for example, what if the pressure in the line isn't right, or there's an off gas, or there's some kind of a weld, or there's something that's come down into the pipeline that jams the tool up. We have no control over those sorts of things. Now, while we try to mitigate that with, doing a pre-inspection to make sure the line's clean and make sure it's clear that we can run the tool, it's never going to be 100%. So we can't go all the way. Now, that doesn't preclude our competitors from saying we're 100%. But I feel that there is more strength in that honesty and that truth than to try and say you are something that you are not. And we've been we've been arguing, let's say, around customer promise for a while and what that could be and what it should be and what we have done and what we should be moving towards and how to evolve the company to make that promise stronger. So it's, and to the point earlier, we need to pull in, people from ops, people from sales, people from business development, people from research. There's a lot of people that are going to have to contribute to that customer promise to make sure it's real and deliverable. And it's not an easy task. It's not easy.
So you draw the line at it being real and deliverable, which I think we can all agree on.
Yeah.
Suzanne, I saw you nodding along there to a couple of things that Rhonda said. Do you have anything you want to add?
What Rhonda said was really great. I've worked with a lot of startups, and there's been in my career a lot of smoke and mirrors, and I've seen it fail. And I do feel strongly about like accountability and being realistic with what you're presenting to people and having a really good like proactive or mitigation plan for when things go wrong. I mean, if you can't win on 100%, showing that sort of responsibility, integrity, I think edges you up for sure.
Exactly, leading with confidence. Christina, I will throw this question to you. How do you make the case for brand building when leadership is focused on a short-term pipeline?
Ooh, good question. I think, especially with B2B marketing, the sales cycle can be very, very long. Your customers aren't necessarily ready to buy today. I think doing those short-term campaigns will hurt you in the long run. Where I think long term, you want to do that brand building so that you build that confidence and trust and reliability with your brand. Where your customers will think of you when it is time for them to buy. So being memorable will help you in long term. Does that answer your question?
Definitely. And I think Rhonda could actually add to this as well. You mentioned earlier that you guys were built up from being last resort to one of the first or top options. Do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
I think that the biggest challenge is hitting your customer from a bunch of different places. Like, I mean, if corporate or your management or your VP level CEO, whoever, if they're focused on, sales, and just bringing money in, and they don't care about your brand, they don't want to build a brand, they're not interested in that. Okay, fine, that's not their wheelhouse. But you are still the wrong person who's responsible for that. So you need to make that happen in another way. So, for example, I mentioned integrity on tap earlier. That is one of our strongest ways to get in front of our customer. We're forcing the brand on them because they're coming to a Rosen branded event. There's Rosen branding everywhere. There are people who are talking, our experts who are giving answers, and we're building that one-to-one relationship with the individuals inside that organization. So it's our sales guy, Jono, with this guy from company X, who are now having a conversation over a pint, and one of them is solving the other's problems. Hopefully it's John who's solving the operator's problems. But regardless, it's a really good way to build your brand in a more kind of covert, subtle way. It's not really overt and out there. And I think that's really helpful, and it helps to educate the customer and sows those seeds for the future. So even though it may not be a marketing qualified lead yet, it's still setting the stage for something to come.
I can add a little bit to that. We try to separate brand, which is considered foundational, from functional marketing, and to educate our clients on like the investment in a brand being foundational, which is like your website, your assets, how you're building over time, is having a certain value for your investors, for like if you want to sell your company down the road, like how that will impact you in that way versus functional marketing, which is something that's, always churning, that will fill your pipeline and all of that. So I feel like that conversation helps people kind of separate them out rather than kind of mushing them together.
I'm also very passionate about this, so I'm lucky to be in an organization where brand is very highly valued and being invested in. But I mean, brand and pipeline are not competing priorities. I think brand is what makes pipeline more efficient because the people have not. I mean, people are doing so much research before they ever get into a sales conversation. And if they haven't heard of you or they don't know what makes you different, or if they don't trust you yet, then that conversation is not going to go anywhere, or you might not even get the conversation. And I think the companies that grow most efficiently are the ones who are investing in both of those things. And, otherwise your demand gen dollars are working so much harder. And in B2B, where sales cycles are so long and decisions especially in my industry's case are very high stakes. Like people are doing so much research and they know who they want to talk to in that sales process. We want to be in that conversation. If we can't get in that conversation, there's no point.
Exactly. So we have about 4 minutes left here on our panel. So I will ask one last question to the group and then I'll let Derek close us off here. So if someone here feels stuck in a risk-adverse organization, what's one small way they can start pushing boundaries tomorrow? Any advice?
Great question, Alex. It's very challenging for sure. I'd say probably just start small. Test a stronger headline, have a more human tone or imagery instead of your cliche imagery. Maybe focus on that clearer point of view instead of trying to put in all the features and all the explanations for everything, and just make baby steps.
I think another one is finding your champions. This happens in the sales process too, right? Like someone who does get it, and trying to get their help to champion it within your organization. And I love the idea of just like subtly starting to ask those questions around why not and what is the risk of us not doing this. So the conversation, if it's always around, but but we need to do this, or we've always done this, or but that's risky. Just peppering in those questions about what's the risk of not doing this. And one of the things with that video that I talked about when I was presenting that idea, another thing I talked about was like ROI is always going to be someone's conversation. Someone's thinking about that. It's important. We should all, I mean, obviously we all want a return on investment. So I looked at what is the our average sale deal size. And I was like, okay, for the cost of this video, if this influences even one enterprise deal or two of our smaller or more average deal sizes, then it's already paid for itself. So why not try it? What's the risk?
That's great advice. Well, we are just about done here, so I'll just wrap it up. And a good summary of our session today is the takeaway is clear. B2B buyers do not leave their humanity in their cars when they walk into the office. True effectiveness lies at the intersection of emotional confidence and technical delivery. And with that, I'll hand it off to Derek.
Awesome. Thank you so much, folks. That was fantastic. There's a lot of great things that I got out of it. This, one of the main things that I really got out of it was the component about, how most creative pitches kind of are won and lost before, you even open up a presentation deck, right? So there needs to be a lot of prep work that happens. So, there's a lot of almost like pre-presentation process, finding your champions, as Jody said. I really like that quote. And just finding who the most important person is in the room when you're pitching creative. I think that's important too. A lot of great advice from you folks here. So thank you so much for joining up. I'm just going to share my screen one more time here to do the whole promotion of all the other events that we're having. Sorry, thank you. So thank you again to the five of you for such a great presentation. Tomorrow we have our last Creativity Week webinar, and this is going to be all about the most expensive sentence in marketing, which is I'll know it when I see it. And this will be with, I think, Dan King from ZGM and, oh gosh, I forgot the other person's name here. From Changemakers, Ed, I believe his name is. So that should be a good one for tomorrow as well. That's happening at 12 p.m. Mountain Time as well. And then just wanted to put this one up again. So yeah, we just have a member survey right now, just helping us develop a better process for the Calgary Marketing Association and helping us come up with new content to present you folks in terms of learning and creating networking events and so on and so forth. So just wanted to hopefully get you folks to scan that QR code and fill out the survey once again. Yeah, thank you so much, Alex. Thank you so much, Jody. Thank you so much, Christina. Thank you so much, Suzanne, Rhonda, Audrey, everybody involved in this webinar. And yeah, I hope everyone has a great day.